The sound of tires on wet asphalt was all I could hear, but in my mind, the image of that guy kneeling in front of me wouldn't leave me alone. The light rain hit the windshield as I kept my hands firmly on the steering wheel, as if that were enough to keep my mind in place. Attention, this is part 2 of the story. Part 1 is in the comments. 3 months had passed since that day at the gas station, and once again I was going to visit my family. The route was the same. The distance was the same. But I wasn't the same since that encounter. 3 months. And yet, the memory of him was still too vivid to be just a coincidence on the road. It was there, at that random stop, that it all happened. A young, confident boy with a lewd, calm look in his eyes followed me into the bathroom, and things just happened. Fast, intense, without words, just gestures, just rapid breathing, just the knowing silence of someone who knows exactly what they're doing and why. Since then, the scene has come back without asking permission. In my thoughts, in my dreams, in the middle of meetings or family dinners. It was as if he had taken more than just that moment, he had taken a piece of me. I told my wife I was going out on Saturday morning, but I left on Friday night. It was a lie. I wanted time to spend there, in the same place, at the same gas station. I knew it was unlikely, that maybe he wasn't even from there. Maybe he had just stopped by chance, like me. But something inside me insisted. A part of me I couldn't control, and that, since that day, had only grown. When I turned right and saw the entrance to the gas station, I felt my heart race. The lights were on, and the blue sign was flashing as before. I parked in the same corner, turned off the engine, and stood there for a few seconds, just breathing. I entered slowly. The same smell of oil and stale coffee. The same tired truck drivers at the tables. The same white bathroom tiles, cold and silent. But he wasn't there. I waited a while. I pretended to wash my hands. I pretended I needed to use the urinal. I pretended I was just another tired man on the road. But he didn't come. Not a step at the door. Not a furtive glance. Nothing. The bathroom remained empty. The emptiness pierced me, and for a moment I found myself laughing softly at myself, at the absurdity of having driven all the way there just for a stranger. But the laughter died quickly, because it wasn't just for him. It was for me. For what I had felt. For what he had awakened in me. And for what I still didn't know how to deal with. I got back in the car with a bitter taste in my mouth. I started the engine. Before leaving, I looked once more in the rearview mirror, as if he might appear at the last minute. He didn't. Still, something inside me felt different. What had started in that bathroom had lodged itself somewhere deeper and didn't seem willing to leave any time soon. Night had fallen completely, the rain continued to fall, and the road ahead stretched out dark and lonely. I wasn't in a hurry. The truth is, I didn't feel ready to get there. Maybe because, after all, going home, looking into my wife's eyes, and pretending everything was normal seemed even harder now. That's why, a few miles down the road, I decided to stop. I found a simple hotel by the highway, one of those with a covered parking space in front of the room, and a quiet, almost sad reception area lit by a cold lamp hanging from the ceiling. I paid in cash, avoided conversation, took the key, and headed straight for my room. It was a small, clean, impersonal space, smelling of disinfectant and overly patterned bedspreads. I left my suitcase next to the bed, hurriedly took off my shoes, and threw myself onto the mattress, still fully clothed, my body tired, and my head too noisy to rest. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the persistent rain and feeling the weight of emptiness in my chest. It wasn't just my body that felt exhausted, it was what had been building up inside me since that day. The memories came back with a vengeance. The bathroom lit by white lamps, the heavy silence, the way he came in behind me. And how everything happened without words, only with gestures, breathing, tension, and surrender. I didn't know his name. I had no idea where he came from, or if I would ever see him again. But that night, lying in some random room on the side of the road, his body was still present in me, in every memory, in every shiver that came out of nowhere. The idea was simple: rest and continue the trip the next morning. Resume my role, put on the persona that others know again. That's what I told myself. But even there, between four cold walls and rough sheets, I knew it wouldn't be that easy. It was getting late, the rain showed no signs of letting up, and between memories, my stomach began to growl. I hadn't eaten anything since late afternoon, and the feeling of emptiness was no longer just emotional. I picked up the phone in the room and called the front desk. The attendant's voice sounded lazy but polite. I asked if there was a restaurant nearby, and he recommended a simple place about 5 minutes away, open until late, where I could get something decent to eat. I got up slowly, changed my jeans for some comfortable shorts, put on a pair of sneakers, and threw a sweater over my t-shirt. The city seemed to be asleep outside, except for that place with yellow light on the corner, where I stopped the car and went in without high expectations. The restaurant was small, with old wooden tables, a television on with the sound off in the corner, and a delicious smell of bread and grilled meat. I sat by the window, ordered a snack with meat, cheese, and fries, and left my cell phone on the table, twirling it between my fingers, as if trying to kill time while my mind wandered far away. I opened an app, scrolled through old messages, looked at photos, and everything seemed more boring than it should have been. Even there, surrounded by silence and the smell of food, the feeling of waiting persisted as if, deep down, I was still looking for something I couldn't name. The waiter passed by with a tray and said my order would be ready in a few minutes. I nodded and turned my eyes back to the screen, but my thoughts were elsewhere. At the gas station, in the bathroom, on him, and on me. The television in the background was low, but constant. Outside, the rain continued to fall, hitting the window like a lazy metronome. The restaurant was simple, smelling of freshly fried food, with a handful of scattered customers. I tried to focus on my phone while waiting for my snack, but something began to bother me. Not a sound, not a word. A look. It took me a while to notice, but there was a young man sitting in the back, alone, a mug in his hands, and his body leaning slightly forward. What caught my attention, however, was the way he was watching me. Not in a blatant or vulgar way, there was a calculated calmness there, almost curious, as if he were studying me from afar. I tried not to pay any attention, but his presence became difficult to ignore. His gaze was direct, steady, but not threatening. There was something about his face, perhaps his restrained expression, perhaps his unflinching eyes that held me captive. It was strange to feel this way about a stranger. Even stranger was the fact that I couldn't look away naturally. I looked again. He was still staring at me. It was as if the environment around us had dissolved for a few seconds. I didn't know who he was or why he was doing that, but something inside me, the same thing that had made me leave home early, the same thing that had pushed me to the gas station 3 months early, awakened. And this time, it didn't seem willing to be ignored. My snack was ready. The waiter motioned me over discreetly, and I went to the counter to pick up my bag. I thanked him, paid, and headed for the door, ready to go back to the hotel and end that strange night. But as I left, I felt that same gaze following me again. He was still at the table, motionless, as if he had done nothing else in the last few minutes, but watch me. As I walked through the door, I turned instinctively and looked back. For a moment, I waited for him to say anything, but he just held my gaze, steady, as if the silence were part of a game I didn't yet understand. I walked to the parking lot with my head full of questions and my stomach still a little queasy, but more from nervousness than hunger. I got in the car, threw the bag on the passenger seat, and started the engine. I looked in the rearview mirror, and then saw him coming toward me. He approached calmly, unhurried, as if he knew exactly what he was doing. I rolled down the window, curious and alert. "Hello, good evening. How are you?" he said, his voice low and polite, his face partially illuminated by the light from the nearest street lamp. "Sorry to bother you, but could you give me a ride?" For a moment, I thought about refusing. My head said no, but something deeper, perhaps more instinctive, answered for me. "Good evening. Sure, you can. Get in." He opened the door, got in, settled into the passenger seat with the same calmness with which he had looked at me in the restaurant, and after a few seconds of silence added, "I don't have any money, but if you want, I can pay you another way." He smiled. It was a slight, almost innocent smile, but with too much intention behind it to be just kindness. I took a deep breath and smiled back, with a mixture of surprise and surrender. "I'm staying at that hotel over there by the highway. Do you want to go there?" "Sure, we can. I live nearby." And so we drove on, without saying much else. The radio was off, the rain was still falling slowly, and the air between us was charged with possibilities. The room was just as I had left it. Yellow light, sheets stretched out, the smell of recent cleaning still present. We entered in silence. He glanced around the room, dropped his backpack in the corner, and turned to me with that same calm, direct look, almost patient. There was no hurry in his gestures, no questions, no doubts in the air. I closed the door slowly, leaned my back against it for a second, as if I needed one last moment of hesitation, and then I gave myself over to what had already been decided since the parking lot. He approached me naturally, as if his body knew exactly where it wanted to be. He looked at me closely, his eyes in mine, and brought his hands to my waist, pulling me firmly but not aggressively. Our bodies touched slowly, as if recognizing each other. The first touch was a kind of relief. The second, an invitation with no turning back. We fell onto the bed like two bodies carrying too much hunger and silence. He knelt between my legs and looked up at me with a smile that said it Alan didn't need to say anything. Then his lips began a journey that made me close my eyes and forget the world outside. Time distorted there. My fingers clenched the sheet, my breathing became heavy, and for a few minutes I was no one but what he made me. When I realized it, we were turned over on the bed, our bodies entwined, our clothes thrown somewhere in the room. He fit into me with such naturalness that it made me shiver, as if that moment had been written long ago and now it was just being fulfilled. I let myself go. Every movement was slow, sure, as if we were reading each other in silence. And even without words, there was an exchange. Much more than just skin. Afterwards, we lay side by side, the sound of rain outside still filling the room, and the warmth of our bodies telling us that, for now, there was no better place to be. Lying side by side, our bodies still warm, and our breathing slowly returning to normal, I lay in silence for a while, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of that moment settle on me with a strange calm. The rain was still falling outside, but inside everything seemed suspended as if time had decided to pause for us. That night, I experienced something I had never experienced before. At the gas station, everything had been fast, urgent, almost instinctive, an impulse too restrained to last. But there, in the hotel room, it was different. There was space, time, and enough desire to explore more than I had imagined. He proposed with his eyes, with his touch, and I allowed it. Not everything was said, but everything was felt. It was unexpected, it wasn't in my plans, nor in my most secret fantasies. But it happened, naturally, as if it were just the next step in something that had been building inside me for a long time. And, to my surprise, I liked it. It wasn't just about the body, it was about surrender, about trusting enough to let it happen. And I let it happen. I turned my face and looked at him. He was also staring at me, with that serene expression of someone who already understood everything or almost everything. He smiled slightly, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking. I smiled back, without saying anything. Some things don't need to be said. After he showed me the way, we drove through the quiet streets of the city to a simple neighborhood, almost deserted at that hour of the night. I parked in front of a house with a low gate and peeling walls. He turned to me and, with a discreet smile, asked, "Can I have your number?" For a moment, I hesitated. The impulse was to say yes, to extend the connection, to allow that moment to linger in some way. But reality quickly set in my wife, my unlocked cell phone on the table, the conversation she sometimes read by accident. It was too risky. "I can't. I'm sorry. My wife might see it. It's complicated for me." He just nodded, as if he had already expected that answer, but without hiding the slight regret in his eyes. I took a deep breath and tried to soften my refusal. "But whenever I'm around, I'll look for you." He smiled with the corner of his mouth, opened the door, and left. Before closing it, he looked at me for a last second. There was something in that look between acceptance and restrained desire that stayed with me even after he turned his back and walked down the dark alley. I turned around and walked back to the hotel in silence. The room was the same, but the atmosphere was different. The mattress still retained the warmth of what had happened. I slowly took off my shoes, lay down, and stared at the ceiling for a few minutes before falling asleep. The next morning, I woke up early. I took a quick shower, packed my things, and without breakfast, hit the road back. The city was still slowly waking up, and the sky was clear, as if the whole world had rested. But inside me there was something new, something I couldn't name yet, but that had definitely awakened. The weekend with my family was peaceful, even lighthearted. Being with my children, listening to my wife's stories, having lunch without rushing. For a few moments, I was able to disconnect. I allowed myself to exist only as a father, as a husband. It was as if the other part of me had been locked in a room by the side of the road, deliberately forgotten. On Monday morning, after a quiet breakfast and a quick kiss on my kids' foreheads, I hit the road again. The sky was clear, the air still cool from the night before. I turned on the radio, tried to focus on work, on the week's to-do list, and carry on as if everything were normal. Almost without noticing, time passed. That's when I saw the sign, the entrance to that gas station. The same one from 3 months ago. At the time, I didn't think about him. I swear I didn't. I had accepted that it had been a coincidence, an encounter outside the axis of my life, too intense to last, too strange to try to repeat. But my car thought for me. The reserve light came on, and the warning on the dashboard flashed insistently. With no choice, I pulled over to the shoulder and entered the gas station. I parked next to the pump, got out, asked for a full tank, and went to the cashier to pay. The girl at the convenience store greeted me with her usual bored tone, and I just nodded, distracted, thinking about the stretch of road I still had to drive. I left the store with the receipt in my hand and headed for my car, putting the keys in my pocket. That's when I saw him. There, sitting on a bench against the side wall of the bathroom, he was there. Same calm posture, legs slightly apart, head tilted forward. Elbows resting on his knees, as if just waiting for time to pass. He looked at me. No fear, no surprise, just looked. And for a second, everything around me lost its sharpness, the noise of the trucks, the sound of the pumps, even the wind blowing through the gas station courtyard. There was only that look. I stopped. Not because I wanted to, but because my body stopped on its own. Our eyes locked for a few moments, and time between us seemed to pick up where it had left off. But the moment our eyes met, something inside me tightened. Out of reflexer, perhaps out of fear of what it meant, I headed straight for my car. I got in, started the engine, and sat there for a few seconds, my hand on the steering wheel and my heart racing. I could have just driven away. And that was exactly what I should have done. But I didn't. Something was holding me back, a silent desire that spoke louder than any rational thought. I turned off the engine. I moved the car away from the pump and parked on the other side, in a more discreet spot near the restroom. He was still there, sitting, staring at me. Calm, just like last time. As if he knew that sooner or later I would stop resisting. I got out of the car. I crossed the courtyard slowly, feeling the wind on my face. Before entering the restroom, I looked at him one last time. He didn't look away. I went in. The room was the same cold tiles, stained mirrors, the muffled echo of the highway outside. I walked to the sink, turned on the faucet, and splashed water on my face, trying to cool something that was already boiling inside. I took a deep breath. I grabbed a paper towel and started drying my hands. That's when the door opened behind me. I didn't need to look to know who it was. But I looked anyway. He came in without saying a word. He went straight to the private stall and pushed the door open with his fingertips, leaving it ajar. He stood there, half in, half out, and stared at me through the mirror. He made a slight gesture with his head. A call. My body responded before I could think. I looked around. No one. Without thinking twice, I crossed the space between us. I entered the stall and closed the door behind me. The space was small, dimly lit, with thin walls and stale air, but enough for two bodies that knew exactly what they were doing. And, in that moment, nothing else mattered. He didn't say a word. He just leaned his back against the wall of the narrow booth and pulled me by the waist with the same silent firmness as before. The touches began slowly, almost carefully, as if he knew exactly where and how to touch me. My eyes closed reflexively, and everything around me seemed to disappear there. Was only the muffled sound of rain outside and the sound of our breathing mingling together. When I felt the warmth of his mouth reach me, my whole body reacted. It was like the first time, but more intense. I already knew what was coming, but it still caught me off guard. My muscles tensed, my hands sought support on the thin wall, and for a moment I almost lost my breath. That warm, wet feeling, so well executed, it was impossible not to give in. The place was cramped, uncomfortable, and at any moment someone could walk in. And maybe that was what made it even more intense. The fear, the forbidden, the risk of being discovered. The small space made the heat between us multiply. I just let it happen. There, with my body pressed against the door and my senses in disarray, I realized I was no longer in control. And the truth is, I didn't even want to be. It didn't take long. The way he touched me, the precision of his mouth, the calmness with which he conducted everything, it was impossible to resist for long. My body was on fire, every nerve on alert, and the pleasure came with force, like a wave impossible to contain. I exploded in him. With my whole body trembling, my chest heaving, and my hands pressed against the cold wall, I let myself be carried away by that rush that seemed to tear something much deeper than just the physical out of me. It was desire. It was surrender. It was escape. And all of that found an outlet in that moment. He stayed there, unhurried, enveloping me as if he still wanted to hold on to every second of what had just happened. Then he looked up at me with a slight smile on the corner of his mouth, and in that smile there was pride, provocation, and a certain silence that said more than any words could. I stood there, trying to catch my breath and understand what it still did to me, even after everything. I quickly got myself together, my fingers a little shaky, my body still feeling the weight of what had just happened. We didn't exchange words, not even glances. Like the first time, I simply turned my back, opened the cabin door, and left the bathroom without looking back. Outside, the world remained the same. The parked trucks, the distant sound of the highway, the damp wind carrying the smell of wet asphalt. But inside me, everything was different again. I got into the car, closed the door firmly, and started the engine. The radio station I had been listening to before was still playing softly, some song filling the silence I didn't want to face. I put the car in gear, left the gas station, and got back on the road as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. Again. And even without fully understanding it, a certain relief washed over me. As if, no matter how confusing it all was, no matter how forbidden and out of place, a part of me had found a strange kind of peace therein, the surrender, in the risk, in the silence shared with someone I didn't even know the name of. I continued my journey without thinking, just driving, just feeling. It's been a few days since then, and now, with the next weekend coming up, I'm going back once again to visit my family. But, to be honest, my thoughts are elsewhere. I have two possibilities before me, two paths, two chances, and I confess I'm hoping that at least one of them is waiting for me. As soon as I get back, I promise to tell you all about it. I hope you enjoyed this trip as much as I enjoyed living and reliving every moment. It was intense, it was unexpected, and, in a way, liberating. I think everyone should experience at least once in their life what it's like to get lost just a little to find themselves in a different way. Now, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a similar experience, or would you like to? Leave a like if this story touched you in any way, and don't forget, the uncut version is here in the comments. My name is Mike. I'm 41 years old, married, and have 2 children. Kisses, and see you soon.